2026 is a brand new year for games with a ton of exciting new releases coming up, and 2025 likely made a lot of new fans of JRPGs, thanks to Clair Obscur Expedition 33. If you found yourself being a big fan of that Game of the Year winner, maybe you want to see what franchise was so influential on that game being made. What inspired the developers at Sandfall Interactive? Well, it's one of the most influential gaming franchises of all time. If you've ever wondered what it is about Final Fantasy that makes people light up when they talk about it, why so many of the games are celebrated as pivotal moments in the gaming canon, or why people would spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars just to have a magic card with their favorite little guy or sad prince on it, you've likely thought, okay, well, where do I start if I want to get into this? For many, it may feel like common knowledge, but if you're truly on the outside looking in, it's worth saying, Final Fantasy is an anthology series. The best way to look at the mainline Final Fantasy saga as you approach it for the first time is that each numbered entry is basically a reinvention or a new take on a core set of themes or tropes with their own individual tones, backstories, lore, cast of characters, and sometimes even battle systems. This is why there are some weird titles like Final Fantasy X-2. It's another game that explores the same setting and cast of Final Fantasy X, which is different from Final Fantasy IX. By the time we hit 12, 13, also very different from one another, and different from 10, 9, 8, etc. All this is to say, you don't need to play Final Fantasy 1 through 6 to play 7, you don't need to play 7 to play 8, and so on and so forth. Now, while this truth of Final Fantasy as a series may help break down the wall of giving yourself an incredibly daunting backlog just to play the 7th, 10th, or 15th entry in a series, it also raises another overwhelming question. If you can hop into any Final Fantasy game as your first, which one should you pick then? The common answer you'll most likely get is look at a synopsis and the art style and direction of each mainline game and follow whichever speaks to your heart the most. Because some Final Fantasy games are more fantastical, some are fairy tale inspired, some are more personal, modern stories with characters facing modern struggles. There's just a lot of flavors to consider. But that's not why you're here. You're here to get a recommendation on a definitive place to start, and honestly, I think the best place that anybody could start their Final Fantasy journey is with Final Fantasy VII Remake. Wherever you have the chance to play it, whether that's on PlayStation or PC, as you've been able to for years now, or now finally on an Xbox or a Nintendo Switch 2. It's the newest, most relevant, and currently still ongoing storyline coming out of the Final Fantasy teams over at Square Enix. Final Fantasy VII Remake and the complete definitive version of the game, Remake Intergrade, starts a trilogy of titles, reimagining and telling a more comprehensive version of the original Final Fantasy VII released on the PS1 back in the late 90s. This original game changed people's lives. It introduced Final Fantasy as a series and JRPGs as a genre to a global audience on a massive scale for the first time really ever. In the years following Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy as a series has continued to experiment and aimed to reinvent itself, with some entries landing better than others. But critically, no attempt at moving Final Fantasy forward into a new generation these last several years has been more successful than this project that reflects on and reinvents the series' past. But history lesson aside, this game is meant to be for you, the newcomer watching this video. While there are nods, references, and Easter eggs in both Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that are meant to set the hardcore audience spiraling and theorizing between game releases, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a wonderful introduction to the magic of this series, while also just feeling great to play. Featuring an engaging action combat system with a strategic element of choosing when to trigger your party's distinct abilities and ultimate attacks, Remake features the most enjoyable combat system I've played in any game, probably ever. I could spend hundreds of hours engaging with it. In fact, I did over the course of 2 playthroughs of 7 Remake and over 100 hours in 7 Rebirth. Story-wise, Final Fantasy VII Remake is complete. You don't need to know anything going in. You'll feel satisfied at the end of it, but if you enjoy it, you'll likely want to see where the story goes in Part 2 and Part 3. Players follow along with the main character, Cloud Strife, a mercenary whose entire world changes thanks to the companions he meets in pursuit of a payday. Cloud learns a lot about himself, his former employer, and the secrets of the world throughout Final Fantasy VII Remake, and you will be learning every lesson right beside him. Now, while you might feel pressured by fans, or you might feel the need to be familiar with every detail of the original, you really don't have to. The game presents its story like you are a brand new player who has no idea what the life stream is, who Sephiroth is, or why Cloud has a big sword. But if you'd like to go into Remake with some basic knowledge of the foundational lore and original story of 7 from the 90s, check the description to see our latest video covering this topic, to better prepare you for the twists and turns that Remake takes on that original foundation. Now, it's worth noting that Final Fantasy as a series is often pretty lighthearted, while also having some of the most devastating, heart-wrenching cutscenes and interactions you've ever seen. While some of the more eccentric elements of Final Fantasy as a series may be new to you, if you only play more serious, grounded games like a God of War or The Last of Us or Hellblade, there is an earnestness and tenderness to this cast and this game that will likely charm you by the end. Because at its core, Final Fantasy VII Remake tells a story of standing up for what's right in solidarity with your neighbor. The grip of an evil, greedy corporate government looms over the entire game, and the story moves with the urgency of your favorite rebel story from a Star Wars film. Here's the world, here's why you should care about it, here's an exciting mission to get introduced to everything, you'll learn more as you go. Now, with this latest release of 7 Remake, Square Enix has even included boosts to help you more easily experience the story if the narrative and characters are what you really care to see. So if you want your first experience wading into the world of Final Fantasy to feel like a modern video game with modern conveniences, plus incredible visuals, instead of picking up a game from 3 decades ago that old fans love, or a modern game that's not really an RPG and shifting away from the tone people expect out of a Final Fantasy, Final Fantasy VII Remake is really the best place to start. Now, while Final Fantasy VII Remake only covers a portion of the original story, it has fully expanded to be its own 30-plus hour adventure. You can easily entertain yourself for dozens and dozens of hours with just this first part of this trilogy. And honestly, right now at the beginning of 2026, it might be the best time to get invested with the story of Cloud, Tifa, Aerith, Barret, and Sephiroth. Because like I mentioned, this 7 Remake project is still ongoing. If you end up enjoying Final Fantasy VII Remake, you not only have another game to play in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, which is currently on PS5 and PC, but is going to make its way to a multi-platform release, we also still have the climactic final part to look forward to sometime in the next few years, which is also confirmed to be multi-platform at some point. But going into a brand new year, it seems like the next major Final Fantasy release is going to be the final part of this trilogy. Final Fantasy XVII is nowhere in sight. There doesn't seem to be a major remake on this scale for any other Final Fantasy coming out anytime soon, and most of the Final Fantasy promotional hype cycle this year will likely be on the announcement of the next Final Fantasy XIV expansion. So if you want to be there for the big, climactic, cultural moment that will surely be taking place when 7 Remake Part 3 releases, the grand finale of this dream project first announced in 2015, a project whose scope and scale we will likely never see again. Now is the time to start catching up and playing Final Fantasy VII Remake. And even if you burn through the game too quick on your Xbox or Switch 2 and you can't wait for the unannounced Rebirth multi-platform release, the other good news is there are still plenty of Final Fantasy games to try out, including more games in the 7 universe. Now, I know this is a lot of info, and it can always feel daunting approaching a new game or a historied franchise you have no experience with, but rest assured, I have seen plenty of people fall in love with Final Fantasy as a series after playing Remake. Some of it even walked away with it becoming their new favorite game of all time. So in 2026, the best place to start your Final Fantasy journey, the best game to really see what it is about Final Fantasy that connects with so many people, it is Final Fantasy VII Remake. Will you be picking up the multi-platform release of Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade on Switch 2 and the Xbox Series consoles as your first game in the series? Have you tried to get into the series before? Has Clair Obscur opened your eyes to a whole new genre and history of video games? Let us know your story with Final Fantasy in the comments, and for more on the future of Final Fantasy and gaming as a whole, you can stay tuned right here and over on GameRant.com.